Hey, it's Nikki Llewellyn-Gregory, and you're on Gut Plus Science. You're in for a fast-paced, storytelling, action item-rich leadership growth experience. I hope you make this podcast a habit. I consider it a leadership mentoring tool. Learning together makes us better together, and that is how we change the world around us. Let's get to it. Hey, Gut Plus Science listeners, it's Nikki, and today's episode is a special series with my friend Renée Smith. It's called To Work with Love. I believe that loving leaders transform workplaces and create work experiences that are meaning-filled. Renée fights against fear-based leadership and helps us learn how to lead with love and do it in such an empowering way. You're going to love this episode. Renée, take it away.
Hi, this is Renée from A Human Workplace, the host of To Work with Love. This is the podcast series that makes the case for putting love at the center of work. I'm a social scientist, and in my research, I interview people about their experiences of love and fear at work. And from what I've learned, I am convinced that more loving and human workplaces are good for people, good for teams, and good for results too. When we cultivate a loving way of working, where everyone has the opportunity to find joy and satisfaction, belonging and contribution, meaning and success, when that happens, then everyone can thrive. And this need to thrive is so great that I have committed most of 2024 to this topic. When I talk about thriving, I don't mean your typical wellness or resilience practices, though those can be important. They have their place. But when I talk about thriving, I'm talking about moving away from wasteful, frustrating, harmful operations and culture toward experiences at work that are characterized by courage and clarity and wholeness, spaciousness, simplicity, and hope. So today we're going to talk about wholeness. It's time for wholeness. And we're going to talk about how to bring wholeness to your workplace and understand why it's so important and look personally at what wholeness means. So it helps to begin to just talk about what is wholeness and why it's important. So wholeness, if you were to define it, is to be complete or full or total. And in some ways, defining wholeness or expressing what wholeness is easier when we think in terms of what it's not. So if something isn't whole, it's broken and fractured and incomplete. And so if you'll just bear with me for a moment, I want to geek out on the language a little bit. I think language is really important. It subtly impacts how we perceive the world and the language, that we use and apply to things. And so when we consider what not being whole means and consider this language, just take this in and think about how these words fall on you and how we use them. So if we're not whole, we're broken. We talk about broken hearts and broken promises and broken glass and the coffee maker being broken or someone breaking the law or a horse being broken to ride or someone having a broken spirit. When we talk about something being fractured, we think about a fractured bone or a fractured relationship, or perhaps we're experiencing a fracture in the community, something like that. We think about things being incomplete instead of whole. We might feel incomplete without our family nearby, or we might receive it incomplete in a course, or maybe a project or a data set or building construction is incomplete. Or we might say that a story sort of cut off abruptly and felt incomplete. If something's incomplete, we have the sense of loose ends and of things being undone. None of that feels very good, being broken or fractured or incomplete. But if we think about the opposite now, when we experience wholeness, those experiences bring up ideas of being wholehearted, of having integrity, of authenticity and functionality and health, of connection and flow, and even reliability and having accomplishment. So we humans have a natural longing for wholeness and the desire to avoid all that fracture and brokenness and incompleteness. And if you think about it, we can pursue wholeness in every area of our lives, including our work. So I want to just think about at the different levels of scale, how wholeness shows up for us, how we want wholeness. So we want to be whole as individuals, personally. No one that I've ever met wants to pretend or hide who they are, their authentic selves. No one wants to live out of integrity with their values. when we talk about bringing our whole selves to work, it's really what we mean. Well, that phrase, bring your whole self to work, can be super controversial and triggering for people. It can be like, wow, what do you mean? And what are you talking about? And what I have found is that usually that phrase, what that means to bring your whole self to work, is clear to those who don't feel welcome to be authentic, who don't feel comfortable in the culture to be who they are. And like they know what that means. Whereas those who are usually, well placed in power or sort of in a stronger place in the culture, who feel comfortable and authentic and like don't even question that, those are the folks who sometimes sort of step back and say, well, wait a second, what do you mean by that? I don't know if I want my whole self or your whole self. If you're not struggling under the damage of hiding who you are, then that may be confusing. But the bottom line is, it is damaging to have to hide ourselves and pretend we're something that we're not. And as we'll see in a few minutes, we miss out on a huge amount of value too when we aren't whole and when others aren't whole. So we want to be whole as people. We also want to have wholeness in our relationships. No one wants to be ignored or ostracized or marginalized. We want trusting, respectful human connections. That these kinds of connections are essential for our sense of well-being. And scientists have found that those trusting human connections are essential for our neurophysiological stability and wellness too. So we need to be whole in our relationships. We also want to be whole in our work processes. And this gets, really nuts and bolts. So no one wants to do work that is disjointed or siloed. That is a really bad experience. No one wants to be confused or make a bunch of mistakes that have to be fixed. It's so much better when we can work in flow and like in coherence with all of the pieces and parts of a process in unity, in wholeness. And it's better to have shared clarity about who does what by when, and to understand what the standard is and how everything's going to flow together to create that whole sense of value. And then finally, we want wholeness when it comes to our purpose and our priorities. We don't want gaps. We don't want to be misaligned. We don't want to wonder about why we're doing something. We do better work when we know what's important and how we can help as part of the whole. And this is where that clarity that I was talking about in the last episode intersects with wholeness. Clarity helps us to be whole in our work. So a few years back, I was hosting a human workplace gatherings in several cities. We hosted them in Olympia, in Seattle. They were being hosted in San Diego, and I hosted several times in Barcelona and Reykjavik. And these gatherings were a chance to be in community, to discover and practice what it is to be loving and human at work. And we would have 40, 60, 80, sometimes 100 people at these gatherings. And they were centered around building relationships in the room to make good connection and to build a sense of trust and safety, and then exploring just a little bit of content, and then being in dialogue and having conversations and skill building and practice and integration, and then finally ending in relationship and community. And they were super powerful experiences. And in that work, it became really clear just how much harm was being done when only parts of us were welcome in the workplace. Like again and again, these stories of people having to either hide themselves or feeling fractured or unwelcome or suppressing aspects of their normal humanity when all that was happening, and how damaging it was and how much was being lost. And so I developed a model for this in a workshop and started working with people on what it is to be whole. And so today I want to share that model with you and then give you a personal exercise that you can do to reflect on your own wholeness and why it's so important for you and for everyone else. So you might grab a piece of paper or maybe open a document on your computer and just write this down. The acronym that I'm going to use is the word INSPIRE. INSPIRE, because I believe that when we can bring our whole selves, whole humans are inspiring, that our whole humanity will inspire our own work and that we inspire each other when we are whole. And so let me tell you what each of the letters of INSPIRE stands for. So the I in INSPIRE stands for identities. And there are several layers to this idea of identities, or this construct of identities. So identities in terms of our race, our gender, our age, our ethnicity, our sexual orientation, our ability, and more. Those kinds of typical categories of identities that we might first think of. And then in addition to that, a part of our identities are the experiences that we've had in life, things that we have gone through that might be really positive and uplifting, or maybe we're really challenging, or maybe we're really traumatic, but that are part of our life experience that shapes who we are. And then there are things that we love to do, ways that we like to spend our time, or things that we get excited about or that we just enjoy. And those also shape our identities. So I'll use myself as an example. I am a white woman who was raised in the 60s and 70s by young parents who were married at 17 and 19 and are still married today. I'm a person whose first husband suffered a traumatic brain injury and who raised 2 sons and 2 daughters as a single mom. I'm a person who loves to travel and to write and to row and to host dinner parties. And all of those are examples. It's not everything, right? But all of those are examples of parts of my identity that weave together to make me me. The N in inspire stands for intuition. Now you gotta go with me here. We're gonna drop the I and go to the N in intuition to make this acronym work. Our intuition is our deep knowing that often comes from our culture or our life experiences that we've had. The S in inspire stands for spirit. So our sense of connection to something outside of ourselves, to a greater purpose or energy or community beyond ourselves, to the wider world. The P stands for our physical body, with all of its abilities and disabilities, just as it is. The I stands for intellect. So our mental capacity, what we know, how we think, our education, whether it's formal or informal, that makes up our intellect. The R stands for relationship. So we are social beings as humans, and we learn and make sense of the world through being in relationship with each other. And so our relationships, the nature of our various relationships impacts and is part of who we are. And then finally, E stands for emotions. We are emotional beings. We feel in response to experiences that we have, and those feelings manifest as emotions in our bodies. And so emotions are part of being human. Now, all these, as I said, are part of the whole human experience. And each of these are sources. Each of these inspire factors are sources of wisdom and insight. Each of them provides a special kind of data that we can value and learn from and incorporate into our work. And I would place bets that you already naturally do, that when left to your own devices, all of these different aspects of you contribute to your work and infuse your work. I think it's our work as humans to know and love and embrace and integrate all of these parts of ourselves, to be fully present to them all and to bring our full ways of knowing into the world. What's true is that when it comes to work, too often we're told to only bring like part of us, like our mental faculties and our physical body maybe, but to like leave the rest behind. All our other stuff is pretty messy. I don't know that we want that. Just like bring your thinking and show up and, to the workspace, whatever that is. But the truth is that each aspect of us can inspire our work and bring insight and value if it's welcomed. So I have had people in workshops that have provided some of the most amazing examples of this, and I want to share a few of those with you to just like give a flavor of what I mean. So one participant in the Whole Human Workshop talked about how because of her identity as a Wiccan practitioner, she knew what it was to be harshly judged by others, and that this made her more compassionate and a better social worker. Another person who'd experienced homelessness intuitively knew ways that his team's work might impact those who were on the edges of society. Like he had a visceral lived experience that could inform his team. There was a person with physical disability who described how she could bring unique insights and problem-solving skills to her work because of her experience of moving through the world as a person with physical limitations. And another person who was gay talked about what it meant to have a chosen family and how that helped him create acceptance for others on his team. In terms of emotions, I have personally had the experience when exploring an issue with my team that we're, if we're talking away about something and kind of exploring something and trying to understand what's going on, of choking up when I start to speak about the thing that is the core issue. And I notice this and realize, oh, this thing that I just named, we found it. I found it. This is the thing. And that I can say to my team, oh, okay, I'm feeling it. Here it is. This is the thing that I think is important. And, my body and my emotions are informing me. They're giving me wisdom and insight. And so, thankfully, I've, created a culture on my team where any of us can do that and where I value and welcome that and, have people around me who do too. I have to say that I've also worked on teams where it isn't valued and welcomed, right? Where I couldn't speak about the, a rising sense of emotion, or I couldn't tear up and, name something through my tears. I would have been harshly judged. I would have been thought to be, oh, there she goes again. That experience. So what I can say though is on those teams, and one in particular that I'm thinking of, how much was missed out because I couldn't bring that insight forward and had to sort of suppress and hold that part of myself in check. And really, that's what I'm talking about, is that these aspects of ourselves teach us things. They are not only part of who we are, but they bring insight and wisdom and brilliance to our work. And so this wholeness is super important. And, in order to thrive, we're talking about being whole ourselves and inviting others to be whole too. And so I just invite you as an exercise to go through each of the inspire factors, to list out, the INSPIRE and the identities, intuition, spirit, physical body, intellect, relationships, and emotions, to list all those out and then to take inventory for yourself. Ask yourself, what's true for you in each of those? How would you describe yourself in each of those? And then ask yourself, how do each of those inform your work? How do they show up in your work? How do they impact what you do every day? Some of them might be really obvious, and some of them might take some time. It might be that as you're working away, you notice, there's that thing, that's that part of me showing up in my work. I hadn't realized it before. So pay attention to that and realize that as you feel comfortable bringing who you are and what you hold, that it can positively impact your work. So here's the kicker. If this is true for you, that your wholeness makes you uniquely brilliant and brings insights to your work and your team, and this is true for everyone else too. And that's why we need to create our own wholeness and invite everyone else to do that too. We create psychological safety and trust when we do that. And that opens up to so many more possibilities on our teams. And this is where it gets operational, because from that safety, from that trust, we can create strong, whole relationships and communication. It helps us to operate better. We can improve our processes and help the work to flow more smoothly. And we can go from fragmentation to connecting our daily work to the greater purpose and objectives of our organization. All of that becomes possible as we become whole and invite others to be whole. We can really begin to work with love and to thrive when we're whole. Thank you so much for listening today. If you found this episode to be valuable, please let us know. I'd love to hear from you. And please share with colleagues and give us a shout out on social media. Together, we can amplify the message of love and make work more human. If you want to find out about previous episodes in this series, or if you want to learn more about how to build a thriving organization, you can check out our website, makeworkmorehuman.com. That's makeworkmorehuman.com. Until next time, trust your instincts to be loving and human, because it's time to work with love.
We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.